Trump News, Live, 11 GOP senators vote against Ukraine aid as Cruz faces lawsuit over 2020 election. Texas Senator Ted Cruz is facing a lawsuit from a campaign group seeking to get him disbarred in Texas for his participation in a failed attempt to get the 2020 election overturned at the U.S. Supreme. Mr. Cruz, who formally objected to Joe Biden's victory in the Senate even after the Capitol was attacked by Trump supporters during the proceedings, is accused of violating legal ethics by participating in the doomed Texas v. Pennsylvania case that his state sued several others that Mr. Biden had legitimate. Meanwhile, as the 6th of January committee prepares for a summer of what promise to be shocking and disturbing hearings about the Capitol riot, Donald Trump has laid into committee member Liz Cheney, claiming that she has taken her opposition to him to extremes. In an interview with the Washington Post, he called her a crazed lunatic. The committee's first public hearing since last year is set for 9th of June. Kellyanne Conway says Ivanka shared couples therapist numbers as Melania backed her through marital woes. Former White House advisor and Trump campaign manager Kellyanne Conway claims in a new book that Ivanka Trump gave her the numbers of marriage therapists after her husband, Trump critic George Conway, attacked and insulted her boss on Twitter. Michigan's chief elections official says Trump suggested she be tried for treason and executed. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who has pushed back against a wave of threats after Joe Biden won the state in the 2020 presidential election, said in an interview with NBC News that she was told Trump had suggested in a White House meeting that she should be arrested for treason and it was surreal and I felt sad, she told the network, which is airing the interview in full on Thursday night. It certainly amplified the heightened sense of anxiety, stress and uncertainty of that time, which I still feel in many ways, because it showed there was no bottom to how far Trump and his supporters were willing to stoop to overturn or discredit a legitimate. Legal watchdog asks Texas bar to suspend or disbar Ted Cruz for trying to overturn 2020 election. A legal watchdog group that seeks to sanction the lawyers who pushed Trump's bogus stolen election narrative through the courts has asked the Texas State Bar to suspend or revoke Senator Ted Cruz's license to practice law for his involvement in frivolous election lawsuits in Pennsylvania. Republicans denied the idea that were reconnaissance tours before Jan 6. The committee investigating the attack says evidence directly contradicts that. In February, Republicans on the House Administration Committee sent a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi claiming they had reviewed the security footage around the 6th of January, 2021 attack on the halls of Congress and said, it did not support these repeated Democrat accusations about so-called reconnaissance. But in their letter to Republican Congressman Barry Loudermilk, the chairs of the House Select Committee investigating the Capitol attack said their review of evidence directly contradicts that denial. Jan 6 committee asks GOP congressman for information about tour he led the day before riot. The House Select Committee investigating the Capitol attack has asked U.S. Representative Barry Loudermilk to give evidence about a tour he allegedly led the day before pro-Trump mob stormed the same halls. Pelosi challenges GOP to reject replacement theory after only one Republican backs domestic terrorism bill. Why isn't everyone in this Congress saying, I reject replacement theory? House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said outside the U.S. Capitol on 19th of May. Her remarks came the day after a vote in the House of Representatives to establish domestic terrorism offices across 3 federal agencies, with a mass shooting in Buffalo among white supremacist-driven attacks that federal law enforcement has repeatedly warned is on the rise. Only one Republican, Illinois Representative Adam Kinzinger, broke from instructions from House GOP leaders to vote against the bill and joined all Democrats in support. 4 Republicans abstained from voting. It passed by a vote of 222 to 203. House votes largely on party lines to establish Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act in wake of racist killings and warnings from federal law enforcement of extreme. Bill Barr in talks to cooperate with Jan 6 committee, Axios reports. Former U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr is in active discussions with the House Select Committee investigating the Capitol attack, according to Axios, citing sources with direct knowledge. Barr resigned on December 14, 2020. He repeatedly was pushed by the former president to get the Justice Department to declare that the presidential election was marred by fraud, according to reports. He allegedly told Trump that his bogus stolen election narrative was bull. Senate approves $40 billion aid for Ukraine despite MAGA senators' resistance. The U.S. Senate has voted overwhelmingly to approve a $40 billion supplemental spending bill to provide further defensive and financial assistance to Ukraine's government as it continues to resist Russia's The bill passed with support from 86 senators, 47 Democrats and 39 Republicans, a sign of the strong bipartisan support for Ukraine's efforts to defend against Russia. Only 11 senators, Tennessee's Marsha Blackburn and Ted Hagerty, Montana's John Boozman, Indiana's Mike Braun, Idaho's Mike Crapo, Josh Hawley of Missouri, Mike Lee of Utah, Cynthia Loomis of Mississippi, Roger Marshall of Kansas, Rand Paul of Kentucky, and Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, voted against the funding measure, which Mr. Paul had blocked from considering. ISIME report says Trump administration unlawfully punished Ukraine whistleblower. A new report from the Defense Department's Inspector General has concluded that multiple Trump administration officials violated federal whistleblower protection laws by removing from his position after he blew the whistle on Donald Trump's efforts to extort the Ukraine. Colonel Yevgeny Vindman lost his job as a National Security Council lawyer after he made protected communications alleging that former President Donald Trump violated U.S. law by asking Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate then former Vice President Joe Biden and his son during a 2019 The incident led to Mr. Trump's first impeachment in 2019-20, which ended with him being acquitted on an almost entirely partisan vote. Campaign launched to get Ted Cruz disbarred over 2020 election behavior. Ted Cruz, who was one of only 2 senators to formally object to the 2020 election results after the 6th of January attack on the U.S. Capitol, is facing an effort to get him disbarred in Texas because of his actions after Donald Trump's The 65 Project, a bipartisan campaign group, is specifically homing in on Mr. Cruz's participation in the notorious Texas v. Pennsylvania lawsuit filed at the U.S. Supreme Court, which asked the justices to summarily throw out the votes from 4 states Mr. Trump lost, citing non-existent